All right, we're going to talk about the prophet Zephaniah today. Zephaniah. So let's talk a little bit about Zephaniah. Zephaniah proclaims his message around the year 630, kind of in the following years of Josiah's reform. So you kind of learn about through that Nahum's message may have motivated and pushed Josiah to make some reforms. Well, here Zephaniah is coming on after those have kind of been made to proclaim his message. And so these last three prophets that we're reading, part of our reading plan, right? You got Nahum, you got Habakkuk, and you got Zephaniah, are all kind of working around this time of Josiah, before, during, after Josiah. So you have a lot with these prophets and God going on, right? He warns, Zephaniah is warning Judah that judgment is going to befall them. And so they're going to befall them because they just keep worshiping other gods, right? And they have an unjust economic system. So Zephaniah is really troubled by this. He's troubled by what he's seeing. God is displeased with Jerusalem, not turning away from these other gods, as we see that they continue to do throughout Scripture. Part of Zephaniah's context is that he places himself amongst kind of like the humble and righteous people who are following God, who are trying to obey God, who are not wealthy, who are everyday people, maybe marginalized people, oppressed people, who are not well off. And so for Zephaniah, his context, he would be much more motivated to speak out against these economic injustices because of the people in the group that he is a part of. So he experiences that in a way that maybe some other prophets, if they're not in that same alignment, aren't always seeing it. And so he also prophesizes about a world beyond just Judah worshiping God, a world where all people are worshiping God. Boy, that's a forecast, isn't it? That's a real prophecy. Which I have to imagine at that time that they probably couldn't imagine a world where you have everybody worshiping one God. It was not a monotheistic society. Gods were all around, and people took a lot of pride in the gods that they worshiped and believed deeply into the gods that they worshiped. So this would have been quite a statement by Zephaniah to make this statement that, hey, you know what, this is going to be this one God of Israel, and everybody's going to worship this one God. And that would have been a pretty big statement. So a real radical statement here by Zephaniah, a real forecast for what is possible for people and for the future of the faith, what will become of Christianity and the church. I think it's really interesting. So, but we'll get in here to the breakdown because this is another short book. We can do the breakdown and a little background at the same time. So chapter 1, right here in the beginning, you get this strong statement by the prophet about what God is going to do. Some real strong statements here. And so for the people of Judah, this is not good news. This is not God saying that God is going to conquer their enemies. God is going to seek judgment on them. Now, a little tidbit when you read the Bible, if you would go to chapter 1, verse 14, you'll see it says, "The great day of the Lord is near." When you read or hear about the day of the Lord is near, or it says the day of the Lord, typically, most likely, they're talking about a judgment day. And so this is where, you can kind of pick up on that when you read the Bible. Obviously, you can tell when you're reading this is what is happening, but that if a passage just starts out like that, judgment's coming to somebody. So it goes on to say that they are worshiping Baal, and they have some idolatrous priests. This is down around chapter 4, verse 4 in that first chapter. And so it gives you an idea right there of the God they're worshiping and what the priests are doing. And so God is displeased. God is displeased with their worship, and he is going to have judgment on this. Chapter 2, it goes down against the judgment. It speaks of the judgment of Israel's enemies. So, you have this this strong statement about the coming judgment on Judah, but then it pivots, talking about the judgment on Israel's enemies. And then it goes to chapter 3, and it says a couple things about Jerusalem. What's Jerusalem doing that's wrong? So they're doing quite a bit right here, right? Because they talk about this early on in chapter 3. If you want to get an idea of what Jerusalem's doing, maybe things that we can look for as a country, as a community, as people, are we doing these same things? And if so, maybe we need to turn away, right? And you'll see these same themes. They get repeated throughout Scripture, repeated. It is not like people are reinventing new ways to not follow God and do terrible things. They continue to do the same things. At some point, we as humans, we have to learn from this and like move away from that, especially if we are going to claim that we are Christians or that we are believers of God. So it says here that Jerusalem is an oppressing city, so it's oppressing people. It hasn't drawn near to God, which we know that because they've been worshiping other gods. Their officials, they refer to them as lions. Lions, designate like power. But the way it's kind of written, they're almost like abusers. They're abusing their power, right? They're doing it to increase their own power, status, wealth. And so they're being these lions, these ravenous lions that are abusing others. Judges are being unjust, so you have an unjust judicial system. Prophets are faithlessness. They're probably speaking on behalf of other gods and against the God of Israel, so they're not keeping the faith. They're misleading people. They're not speaking truth from the God of Israel, even though they may be claiming they are. And priests, they're not following the law. And it even says that they are profaning the sacred. So here you go. We talk about profanity, using profane language. It's not necessarily curse words that we typically like to associate with. That's kind of a low-level way to think about profane. The more biblical way to think about it is when we do things that goes against what God expects of us, or God's nature, Jesus' nature, right? When we are called to love our neighbor, when we are called to be just, but we choose to be unjust, we profane that name. And when we do it in the name of God, we profane God's name. We misuse God's name. If we were in service and constantly talking about helping the poor and the marginalized, and then we never do anything to help the poor and the marginalized. Granted, we can't do everything. We can't fix everybody's problems. We don't have those resources. We can't say yes to everybody. That's really hard in a church to do because we want to. But that's the thing. We should want to. And when we have the opportunities, we should do it. We should be able to look back in our ministries and the things that we do to be able to say, hey, we did what we were able to do to help people. And so to try to live that out, and because part of it, it'll change our hearts too. It'll make us more open to people's needs and to be able to meet them where they are and help them out. So, and be more loving, be more kind, be more generous, always to have a hand extended to those that are seeking some help. But yeah, so this is what they are doing. They are committing multiple wrongs here that has God being against them and wanting to commit judgment on them. So that is the prophet Zephaniah. So you had, for this reading for this week in our Bible reading plan, you had to read 3 prophets. They probably all take about 10-15 minutes each. Not long, but hopefully you are achieving that and keeping up with your readings and enjoying reading through the Bible. So keep at it.